Number 1. Christopher Macdonald. Christopher Macdonald was born in 1992 in Texas and grew up in a dysfunctional household alongside his brother Sean. Family members later described a chaotic environment marked by instability, though specific details remain limited in public records. As a young adult, Macdonald developed severe mental health issues, including delusions of grandeur and paranoia. He claimed divine status, often referring to himself as God, and exhibited erratic behavior that alienated those around him. His most distinctive feature was extensive facial tattoos, a cracked skull design across his forehead and cheeks, with a cross between his eyes and dark shading that gave him a skeletal appearance. These earned him the nickname Skeletor and served as a visual manifestation of his inner turmoil. Acquaintances noted his fascination with violence and control, but interventions were sporadic and ineffective. By 2020, Macdonald, then 28, had relocated to Las Vegas with Sean and Sean's wife, Kayla Lewis. The trio shared a volatile dynamic, with Macdonald as the dominant figure. Mental health evaluations post-arrest revealed untreated schizophrenia-like symptoms, including auditory hallucinations and grandiose beliefs. In the months leading up to the incident, Macdonald stockpiled weapons and ammunition, fixating on perceived enemies and a need to assert power. The spree unfolded on Thanksgiving morning, November 26, 2020, lasting about 5 hours and spanning from Las Vegas, Nevada into western Arizona. Macdonald drove a black Kia sedan, with Sean and Lewis as passengers. Armed with multiple firearms, including handguns and rifles, he targeted random motorists on highways and side streets. The attacks were opportunistic. Macdonald would slow down, align with a vehicle, and fire shots through the window before speeding away. No robberies or direct confrontations occurred. Victims were selected based on proximity. The first shots rang out around 3:30 a.m. in Las Vegas. Macdonald fired at several vehicles on Interstate 15 and surface streets, wounding drivers and passengers. At a convenience store near Tropicana Avenue, he approached Eric Menjivar, 40, who was with his girlfriend. Macdonald shot Menjivar multiple times at close range, killing him instantly, the spree's only fatality. Minutes later, he confronted a woman and her 2-year-old daughter at a gas station, pointing a gun but ultimately sparing them after the woman begged for mercy. Eric Spangler, another driver, was shot in the arm while on the highway but survived. He later identified Macdonald by the distinctive tattoos. The group continued north on U.S. Route 95 toward Arizona, firing at additional vehicles. In Mojave County, they targeted a police cruiser, grazing an officer's arm. The rampage ended around 8:30 a.m. near Parker, Arizona, when Macdonald crashed the Kia into a ditch during a pursuit. All three surrendered without further resistance. In total, the spree involved at least 15 shooting incidents, injuring 7 people and killing 1, across 2 states. Law enforcement from Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, Arizona Department of Public Safety, and federal agencies responded immediately. The crashed vehicle contained firearms, spent casings, and ammunition linking directly to the scenes. Ballistics matched bullets from Menjivar's body and wounded victims to weapons recovered. Eyewitness descriptions of the driver's facial tattoos aided quick identification. Digital evidence, including cell phone data and surveillance video from the convenience store, corroborated the timeline. Macdonald confessed during interrogations, admitting to the shootings but citing delusions as motivation. He believed he was eliminating threats in a divine mission. Macdonald faced charges in both states. In Arizona, he pleaded guilty in 2021 to attempted murder and related counts, receiving a 10-year sentence. In Nevada's Clark County, proceedings were delayed due to competency issues. Evaluations in 2021 deemed him unfit for trial, leading to psychiatric treatment. By 2022, he was restored to competency after medication and therapy. Trial in Nevada began in 2024. On October 22, 2024, Macdonald pleaded guilty but mentally ill to 23 felony counts. First-degree murder with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit murder, 9 counts of attempted murder, multiple discharges of firearms at occupied vehicles, battery with a deadly weapon, and felon in possession of firearms. The plea acknowledged his mental illness but held him accountable. Sentencing occurred on December 13, 2024, before Judge Tierra Jones. Prosecutors highlighted the terror inflicted on innocent people and the premeditated nature, while defense attorneys emphasized Macdonald's untreated psychosis. Victims and survivors provided impact statements describing lasting trauma, physical scars, PTSD, and shattered sense of safety. Macdonald expressed remorse. "I take full responsibility for my wrongdoing." Judge Jones sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years, plus consecutive terms for enhancements, effectively a minimum of 35 years served. He is incarcerated at High Desert State Prison in Nevada, with concurrent time for Arizona convictions. Sean Macdonald faces capital murder charges in Nevada, with trial pending. Prosecutors seek the death penalty for his role as an accomplice. Kayla Lewis pleaded guilty to lesser charges and awaits sentencing, cooperating with authorities. The aftermath exposed gaps in mental health intervention and firearm access for unstable individuals. Las Vegas enhanced highway patrols and surveillance in response. Families of victims, particularly Mengevers, advocated for better support for survivors of random violence. Macdonald's case, with one death and multiple injuries over a brief but intense spree, underscores how delusions and enablers can turn personal chaos into public horror. This has been the story of Christopher Macdonald. Number 2. Niko Allen Jenkins. Niko Allen Jenkins was born on September 16, 1986, in Omaha, Nebraska, into a family already deeply entangled in crime and dysfunction. His mother, Melanie Thomas, was a member of the Blood Street Gang and had a long criminal record. His father, Warren Watson, was also incarcerated for much of Niko's childhood. By age 11, Niko was already displaying severe behavioral problems. At 15, he committed his first major offense, carjacking, and at 17, he was convicted of multiple armed robberies and assaults. He received a sentence of more than 21 years but served only 10.5 because of juvenile credit and good time calculations. While incarcerated at the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, Jenkins accumulated over 180 disciplinary reports, including repeated assaults on staff and other inmates. He spent extended periods in solitary confinement. Psychological evaluations repeatedly described him as dangerous, impulsive, manipulative, and showing signs of serious mental illness, schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and possible delusional disorder. Despite these red flags, he was released unconditionally on July 30, 2013, at age 26, with no parole supervision, no mandatory mental health treatment, and no transitional housing requirement. Within days of his release, Jenkins began exhibiting overt signs of psychosis. He carved symbols into his forehead and cheeks, lines, crosses, and what he called hieroglyphs. He spoke constantly about hearing voices and receiving commands from a serpent god he named Apophis, after the ancient Egyptian deity of chaos and darkness. He posted cryptic, threatening messages on social media, warning police that the beast is coming and claiming he was carrying out divine orders. He purchased a 12-gauge shotgun and several boxes of slugs from a Walmart in Omaha on August 4, 2013, purchases captured on surveillance video. The killings began 1 week later. On the night of August 11, 2013, Jenkins used the shotgun to execute 2 men within a 2-hour window in North Omaha. Juan Francisco Pena, 27, an immigrant walking home near 30th and Sprague Streets, was shot once in the head. Less than 2 hours later and 2 miles away, Jorge Caju Ruiz, 22, was shot in the head while standing outside an apartment complex smoking a cigarette. Both men died instantly. No robbery, no argument, no witnesses. The same shotgun and ammunition were used in both killings. 6 days later, on August 17th, Jenkins and several associates, including women he manipulated into helping him, targeted Andrea Kruger, 19, as she left her job at a nightclub around 2 a.m. They followed her vehicle, forced her to pull over, and executed her with a single shotgun blast to the head. Her body was dumped in a rural area near the Platte River in Sarpy County. On August 21st, inside an apartment on North 33rd Street, Darren W. Blue Sr., 34, was shot once in the head while sitting on a couch playing video games. Again, no forced entry, no struggle, no theft. The same weapon. For murders. For victims. One shotgun. 24 days. Ballistics quickly linked all 4 scenes. Every slug recovered carried identical microscopic tool marks from the same barrel. Investigators obtained Walmart surveillance footage showing Jenkins buying the exact ammunition used. Cell phone data placed him near each crime scene at the time of the shootings. Witnesses who knew him reported his recent rants about apophis and human sacrifice. On August 29, 2013, police arrested Jenkins at his mother's home. He confessed during interrogation, stating the killings were ritual sacrifices ordered by Apophis to prevent the world from ending. Jenkins was charged in Douglas County with 4 counts of first-degree murder, use of a deadly weapon to commit a felony, and possession of a firearm by a prohibited person. He insisted on representing himself at trial despite repeated warnings from the judge and psychiatric evaluations confirming he was competent to stand trial, though severely mentally ill. During proceedings in 2014, he spoke in rambling monologues, invoked ancient Egyptian deities, threatened witnesses, and filed bizarre motions, including a $24.5 million lawsuit against the state of Nebraska for releasing him from prison. In April 2014, a jury convicted him on all 4 murder counts. In May 2017, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to death 4 times, once for each victim, plus 450 years for the weapons charges. The Nebraska Supreme Court upheld the convictions and sentences in 2017. The U.S. Supreme Court denied certiorari in 2020, finalizing the judgment. Jenkins remains on death row at the Tecumseh State Correctional Institution. He continues to exhibit erratic behavior, self-harm, and grandiose religious claims. His case sparked intense debate in Nebraska over the release of high-risk inmates without supervision, the adequacy of mental health services in prisons, and the state's death penalty process. The 4 victims, Juan Pena, Jorge Caju Ruiz, Andrea Kruger, and Darren Blue, were ordinary people going about ordinary evenings when they crossed paths with a man who believed he was carrying out divine orders. Their families have spoken publicly about the pain of losing loved ones to random, ritualistic violence unleashed by a system that failed to intervene. Niko Jenkins walked out of prison on July 30, 2013, and in less than a month he left 4 people dead and an entire city grappling with questions that still have no easy answers. Number 3. William Bottoms. William Bottoms Jr. was born in the late 1980s or early 1990s in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. One of twin boys raised in a neighborhood where poverty, violence, and the drug trade shaped daily life. His twin brother Lawrence Bottoms followed a nearly identical trajectory: early arrests, prison time, and a reputation that preceded both of them. The family environment was unstable. Absent or incarcerated parents, older siblings already caught in the cycle, and constant exposure to street-level crime. By his mid-teens, William was already deep in that world. At 17, he was arrested for armed robbery and aggravated battery with a dangerous weapon after an incident involving a handgun and a victim who survived but carried permanent injuries. That conviction marked the beginning of a pattern that would define the next 2 decades of his life. From his late teens through his late 20s, Bottoms spent the majority of his time incarcerated. Louisiana's sentencing laws and his accumulating charges meant he served long stretches in state facilities: Angola, Elaine Hunt, Dixon Correctional Institute, for crimes that included aggravated assault, illegal possession of firearms, distribution of controlled dangerous substances, primarily cocaine and marijuana, and parole violations. Each release was followed by a return to the same streets, the same associates, and the same behaviors. Correctional records noted consistent disciplinary problems: fights with other inmates, refusal to follow institutional rules, and multiple stints in solitary confinement. Psychological evaluations conducted during incarceration flagged untreated substance use disorder, impulsivity, and traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder. But meaningful treatment was limited by prison resources and his own resistance. What made Bottoms immediately recognizable, even from a distance, was his facial and neck tattoos. Devil horns protruded from his forehead. A row of jagged, skeletal teeth stretched across his chin and lower jaw. Thick black and gray shading, crosses, and other symbols covered much of his face and neck. These were not subtle pieces. They were deliberate, aggressive, and impossible to ignore. In Baton Rouge's criminal subculture, such visible ink often served dual purposes: a badge of survival and a warning to others. To law enforcement, it was an identifying marker that made him easy to spot in surveillance footage or witness descriptions. To potential victims or rivals, it communicated that this was not someone to cross lightly. In early 2017, Bottoms was released from prison after serving a sentence for assault and drug possession. The release was early. Parole or good time credits reduced what could have been a longer term. Corrections officials classified him as high risk upon discharge. His criminal history, ongoing gang associations, lack of stable housing, and documented history of violence all pointed to a strong likelihood of reoffending. Yet, the supervision he received was minimal. He was placed on standard parole with monthly check-ins rather than intensive monitoring or mandatory mental health or substance abuse treatment. Within weeks, he was back in the same orbit: street-level dealers, users, and individuals moving small to medium quantities of narcotics through North Baton Rouge and surrounding parishes. In the spring of 2017, Bottoms began spending time with a loose group of people involved in the local drug trade. Paranoia became a constant theme in conversations with those around him. He believed people were watching him, talking about him, planning to rob or kill him. Heavy use of methamphetamine, crack cocaine, and marijuana likely intensified these beliefs. Associates later described him as tweaking hard, sleeping very little, carrying a firearm at all times, and becoming agitated over small slights or imagined threats. The night of May 31st into June 1st, 2017, became the point of no return. Bottoms was driving a vehicle. Accounts differ on whether it was his or borrowed, with two other men inside: Dedrick Dwayne Williams, 29, and Mohammed Said Hussein, 24. Both victims were known in the Baton Rouge drug scene, though neither had extensive violent records. At some point during the ride, Bottoms became convinced that the two men were planning to betray him, either to steal money, drugs, or set him up for law enforcement. Whether this fear had any basis in reality remains unclear. No evidence ever emerged that Williams or Hussein were actively conspiring against him. In a sudden, explosive act, Bottoms turned on both men inside the vehicle. He shot them multiple times at close range with a handgun. Autopsy reports later confirmed that each man suffered fatal gunshot wounds to the head and torso. After the shootings, Bottoms did not immediately flee. Instead, he directed an accomplice who was also in the vehicle to keep driving while he attempted to organize the aftermath. He tried to wipe down surfaces, move the bodies, and dispose of shell casings. At one point, the vehicle ran out of fuel on a rural road in East Baton Rouge Parish. Stranded, Bottoms and the accomplice left the scene on foot, abandoning the car and the two bodies in a nearby field. The next morning, June 1st, 2017, a passerby discovered the vehicle and alerted authorities. Deputies arrived, found the bodies, and began processing the scene. Dashcam footage from the responding deputies' cruiser captured the stranded car and the surrounding area, footage that would later prove critical. Investigators recovered multiple shell casings, blood evidence, and fingerprints inside the vehicle. The accomplice, facing serious charges himself, quickly agreed to cooperate. He provided a detailed statement describing Bottoms' actions from the moment the shooting started through the attempt to cover tracks and the eventual abandonment of the vehicle. Ballistics linked the recovered casings to a firearm that had previously been associated with Bottoms. Cell phone records placed his phone in the vicinity of the crime scene during the relevant hours. Physical evidence, blood spatter patterns, gunshot residue on his clothing, and witness statements from people who saw him shortly after the murders closed the circle. Bottoms was arrested on June 21, 2017, roughly 3 weeks after the killings. The arrest came quietly. He did not resist. His twin brother Lawrence had been killed earlier that summer during a police encounter in Mississippi, leaving the family to mourn two sons lost to violence within months of each other. The case moved to trial in East Baton Rouge Parish. During jury selection, defense attorneys raised concerns that Bottoms' facial tattoos would inflame prejudice and prevent a fair trial. The judge allowed the tattoos to remain visible but issued clear instructions to the jury to decide the case solely on evidence. Prosecutors presented the accomplice's testimony, dashcam video, forensic links, ballistics reports, cell phone data, and crime scene photographs. The defense argued that chronic methamphetamine use had triggered a severe paranoid episode, rendering Bottoms unable to form specific intent for first-degree murder. They asked for a lesser conviction on manslaughter or second-degree murder charges. On August 9, 2019, after deliberating for less than a full day, the jury returned guilty verdicts on 2 counts of second-degree murder. The judge imposed the mandatory sentence: 2 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without benefit of parole, probation, or suspension of sentence. Appeals followed, centered on the drug-induced paranoia argument and claims of ineffective assistance of counsel. The Louisiana First Circuit Court of Appeal affirmed the convictions and sentences in 2020. Higher courts declined further review. William Bottoms Jr. is currently serving his sentence at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. He will never be eligible for release. Dedrick Dwayne Williams and Mohammed Said Hussein were young men whose lives ended abruptly in a single night of paranoia-fueled violence. Their families have spoken publicly about the pain of losing sons, brothers, and friends to an act that appeared both impulsive and coldly executed. The case remains a stark entry in Baton Rouge's long history of drug-related homicides, a reminder of how quickly untreated addiction, untreated mental health issues, and easy access to firearms can converge into irreversible tragedy. Number 4. Curtis Algy. Curtis Algy was born on January 10, 1985, in Utah. He grew up in a working-class environment in the Salt Lake City area where early exposure to petty crime, unstable households, and street-level conflict shaped his adolescence. By his mid-teens, he was already accumulating charges: theft, burglary, criminal mischief, assault. None of these were isolated incidents. They formed a steady pattern of defiance toward authority and escalating aggression toward others. In his late teens, Algy aligned himself with the white supremacist skinhead subculture that was active in Utah during the late 1990s and early 2000s. He adopted the ideology fully: racial hatred, anti-government rhetoric, glorification of violence, and marked his commitment visibly. Over the years, he covered much of his face and head with tattoos: swastikas on his forehead, the word skinhead in large block letters across his scalp, cross swords, Celtic crosses, the name of the hardcore band Hatebreed inked prominently on his face, and additional symbols inside his ears and on his neck. These were not casual or decorative pieces. In the circles he ran in, they functioned as both a declaration of allegiance and a deliberate intimidation tool. Anyone who saw him knew exactly what he represented. His adult criminal record is long and consistent. Multiple felony convictions for aggravated assault, robbery, weapons offenses, drug possession with intent to distribute, and parole violations. He served several prison sentences in Utah state facilities, where he continued to accumulate disciplinary infractions: assaults on other inmates and staff, possession of contraband, threats, and repeated escape attempts. Prison records described him as highly impulsive, manipulative when it suited him, and prone to explosive violence, yet capable of calculated planning when pursuing an objective. Psychological evaluations conducted over the years noted antisocial personality disorder, extreme impulsivity, and a deep investment in white supremacist ideology. He was never diagnosed with a major psychotic disorder. His beliefs and actions were considered volitional, not delusional. By 2008, Algy was in his early 20s and already viewed as one of the most dangerous inmates in the Salt Lake County jail system. He had a documented history of escape attempts, including at least one prior successful breakout that ended in recapture. On October 1, 2008, during a period when he was housed at the Salt Lake County Jail awaiting trial on new charges, he saw an opportunity. Corrections Officer Stephen Anderson, 44, was working a routine shift. Anderson was well regarded. Married, father of children, known for being fair but firm. During inmate movement or a classification change, Algy maneuvered himself into a position where he could gain control of Anderson. He overpowered the officer, using physical strength, surprise, and whatever improvised weapon or leverage was available in that moment, and killed him. The exact mechanism was blunt and sharp force trauma. The attack was brutal, sustained, and left no chance of survival. Algy did not flee immediately. He was apprehended within minutes by responding deputies and jail staff. The killing of a corrections officer in a secure facility sent shockwaves through Utah law enforcement. It exposed vulnerabilities in inmate transport and supervision procedures and underscored the lethal risk posed by certain high-security prisoners. The investigation was immediate and thorough. Crime scene documentation, autopsy findings, witness statements from other inmates and staff, video surveillance, where available, and Algy's own post-arrest statements built an airtight case. His extensive tattoo collection became part of the evidentiary narrative. Prosecutors introduced photographs of his face and head to demonstrate his long-standing affiliation with violent white supremacist groups and to illustrate the ideological framework that informed his worldview. Algy was charged with aggravated murder of a peace officer, a capital offense in Utah. Because the victim was a corrections officer acting in the line of duty, the case qualified for the death penalty under state law. During pretrial proceedings, defense counsel raised competency issues and argued that his extreme ideology and history of violence should be considered mitigating factors. Multiple psychiatric evaluations, however, concluded that Algy was competent to stand trial. He understood the charges, could assist in his defense, and was capable of distinguishing right from wrong. His beliefs, while repugnant and radical, were not the product of active psychosis. He ultimately pleaded guilty to the aggravated murder charge in exchange for the prosecution agreeing not to seek the death penalty at the guilt phase, though Utah law still allowed a capital sentencing hearing. In 2010, following a sentencing hearing, a judge sentenced Curtis Algy to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision reflected the severity of killing a law enforcement officer in the performance of his duties, Algy's extensive criminal history, his documented escape risk, and the clear premeditation and brutality of the attack. Utah's parole board later confirmed that no release would ever be considered. Algy is currently incarcerated at the Utah State Prison in Draper, housed in the maximum security unit. He remains heavily tattooed, heavily restricted, and classified as one of the state's most dangerous offenders. His case is studied in corrections training programs as an example of how ideological radicalization, untreated aggression, and inadequate risk assessment can converge into lethal violence, even inside a controlled environment. The murder of Stephen Anderson left a permanent scar on the Utah corrections community. Colleagues remember him as a dedicated officer who went to work expecting to come home to his family. His death became one of the catalysts for improved safety protocols, better training on high-risk inmate movement, and increased security measures around transport and classification changes in county jails across the state. Curtis Algy's face, covered in swastikas, racial slurs, and symbols of hate, served as a billboard for the ideology he embraced and the violence he was willing to commit. That billboard became evidence in a courtroom, a warning ignored too long, and ultimately the visual record of a life that ended in the murder of a man who simply showed up to do his job. This has been the story of Curtis Algy, a walking manifesto of hate who turned that hate into a corrections officer's grave. If you want more deep dives into the most disturbing cases out there, Number 5. Jaime Osuna. Jaime Osuna was born on March 7, 1988, in Bakersfield, California. His childhood was marked by severe physical and emotional abuse, including incidents that led to documented brain damage from head trauma. Neighbors and acquaintances described him as quiet and withdrawn during his early years, but by adolescence, he had already entered the criminal justice system. At age 15, he was committed to the California Youth Authority for multiple offenses, including assaults and threats. This began a pattern of escalating criminal behavior: theft, drug possession, aggravated assault, and violations involving firearms. Osuna developed a heavy methamphetamine addiction, which fueled paranoia and impulsivity. He aligned with local street culture, accumulating tattoos that covered much of his face and body, pentagrams on his forehead, a Joker-like smile extending from the corners of his mouth, cryptic symbols, and phrases that reflected his chaotic mindset. These markings became a signature, both a form of self-expression and a tool of intimidation. Osuna's first confirmed major crime occurred in November 2011. Yvette Pena, 37, a mother of 6 struggling with her own hardships, checked into the El Morocco Motel in Bakersfield on November 13th. Osuna, who had no prior relationship with her, targeted her that night. What followed was a prolonged and sadistic attack. He tortured Pena, inflicting multiple injuries designed to cause maximum suffering before killing her. The exact details, revealed in court documents, included stabbing, beating, and mutilation. Pena's body was discovered the next day by a motel cleaner, decomposed and showing signs of extreme violence. The scene indicated the attack was not impulsive but deliberate, with elements of control and ritual. Investigators quickly focused on Osuna. Witnesses placed him at the motel around the time of the murder, and his history of threats and violence toward women made him a prime suspect. He was arrested on November 18, 2011, after a search of his residence uncovered evidence linking him to the scene, including blood-stained clothing and a weapon consistent with Pena's wounds. Osuna initially denied involvement but admitted in a jailhouse interview that he was one of the last people to see her alive. The case dragged on for over 5 years due to competency evaluations, changes in legal representation, and Osuna's erratic behavior in court. He often ranted about demons, made threats, and displayed no remorse. In March 2017, facing the possibility of the death penalty, Osuna pleaded guilty to 6 charges: first-degree murder, attempted murder from a separate incident, torture, assault with a deadly weapon, criminal threats, and dissuading a witness. During a recorded interview with a reporter shortly before the plea, he confessed in graphic detail, stating he had sadistically, premeditatedly tortured and murdered Pena. He expressed enjoyment in the act and warned he would do it again if given the chance. On May 14, 2017, a Kern County judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Osuna mocked Pena's family members, smirking, rolling his eyes, and showing no empathy as they delivered victim impact statements about the devastation of losing a loving mother and sister. Osuna was transferred to California State Prison, Corcoran, a maximum security facility housing some of the state's most violent offenders. There, on March 9, 2019, he committed another horrific act. Sharing a cell with Luis Romero, 44, who was serving life with parole for second-degree murder, Osuna attacked in the early morning hours. Using a makeshift knife fashioned from prison materials, he decapitated Romero and mutilated the body, removing an eye, a finger, portions of the lungs, and other organs. The attack was so methodical and silent that guards conducting routine checks did not notice for several hours. When they finally entered the cell around 7:30 a.m., they found Osuna calm and the scene gruesomely altered, with body parts arranged deliberately. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation's Investigative Services Unit, along with the Kings County District Attorney's Office, launched an immediate probe. Evidence included the weapon tied around Romero's body with string, blood spatter patterns indicating a prolonged assault, and Osuna's own statements post-incident, where he showed no remorse and even bragged about the act. Prosecutors charged him on April 25, 2019 with murder, torture, mayhem, and assault with a deadly weapon by a prisoner, plus special allegations including a prior murder conviction, making him eligible for the death penalty. Osuna's trial for Romero's murder has been repeatedly delayed. In 2021, after multiple evaluations, a judge declared him incompetent to stand trial due to severe mental illness, exacerbated by years of drug abuse and possible untreated schizophrenia-like symptoms. He was committed to a state hospital for restoration treatment. As of the latest updates, competency hearings continue, with no trial date set. If restored, the case could proceed to a capital phase, but Osuna remains in secure custody. Throughout his legal proceedings, Osuna has exhibited bizarre and threatening behavior, speaking in riddles, claiming demonic influences, filing frivolous lawsuits against the state, and intimidating witnesses. His tattoos have been cited in court as evidence of his mindset, symbols of chaos and evil that he added or modified even while incarcerated. The aftermath has been profound. Yvette Pena's family continues to mourn a woman remembered as kind and devoted, her 6 children left without a mother. Luis Romero's loved ones, including his children, have called for accountability, frustrated by delays in the prison murder case. Osuna's crimes have highlighted issues in California's correctional system: cellmate pairing for high-risk inmates, guard oversight, and mental health resources for violent offenders. A 2021 report criticized Corcoran staff for failing to detect the attack despite routine checks, leading to policy reviews on monitoring and weapon detection. Jaime Osuna remains one of California's most notorious prisoners, a man whose calculated cruelty, lack of remorse, and disturbing appearance have made him a symbol of unchecked evil within the system. His story raises ongoing questions about rehabilitation, the death penalty, and how society handles individuals whose actions defy comprehension. Number 6. Basil Morgan. Basil Morgan was born in 1992 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Though details of his early life remain sparse in public records, he grew up in a working-class environment where he began accumulating minor criminal charges as a teenager: petty theft, trespassing, and disorderly conduct. By his early 20s, Morgan had fully embraced white supremacist ideology, aligning with local neo-Nazi skinhead groups active in the Las Vegas Valley. He marked this commitment permanently with extensive facial and head tattoos: a large swastika under one eye, the words skinhead arched over his eyebrows, an iron cross on the back of his skull, teardrops, and other symbols associated with racial hate and violence. These were bold, unapologetic declarations that made him instantly recognizable and served as both a badge of identity and a tool of intimidation. Associates described him as increasingly aggressive, anti-authority, and immersed in a subculture that glorified confrontation and criminality. Morgan's criminal record escalated through his early adulthood. Arrests for vehicle theft, possession of stolen property, illegal firearms, and assault dotted his file. He served short stints in county jail, but by 2013, at age 21, he was operating with a sense of impunity. That year, on May 6th, he targeted the home of Jean Main, a 75-year-old widow living alone in a quiet Las Vegas neighborhood near Eastern Avenue and Owens. Main was known to her community as kind and independent, a retired woman who enjoyed gardening and spending time with family. Morgan, along with an accomplice, broke into her home intending to burglarize it. When Main confronted them, the encounter turned deadly. Morgan shot her once in the head with a handgun, killing her instantly. They fled the scene without taking much of value, leaving behind a trail of evidence that would later prove crucial. The murder went unsolved for several months. Metro homicide detectives processed the scene. Fingerprints, shell casings, blood spatter, and signs of forced entry. Neighbors reported seeing suspicious activity, including a stolen motorcycle parked nearby. Investigators linked the motorcycle to a separate armed robbery where a man matching Morgan's description had stolen it at gunpoint from another victim. Phone records placed Morgan in the vicinity of Main's home on the night of the killing. Witness statements from his associates, who feared retaliation but cooperated under pressure, described him bragging about the burglary and the shooting. Forensic ballistics matched the bullet recovered from Main's body to a weapon later traced to Morgan through a chain of illegal sales. Morgan was arrested on July 31, 2013, initially on unrelated warrants, but quickly charged with first-degree murder, robbery, burglary with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy. The case drew immediate attention due to his visible neo-Nazi tattoos, which prosecutors argued reflected his character and propensity for violence, though they were not direct evidence of the crime. The legal proceedings became a national story for an unusual reason: Morgan's appearance. In 2016, during his trial for the motorcycle robbery, separated from the murder case, defense attorneys argued that his tattoos, symbols of hate like swastikas and racial epithets, would prejudice the jury and deny him a fair trial. District Judge Douglas Herndon agreed, ordering that Morgan's face and neck be covered daily with professional makeup applied by a court-funded artist. The process took 2 hours each morning, using heavy foundation and concealers to erase the ink. Jurors saw a clean-faced defendant, and on August 4, 2016, convicted him of robbery with a deadly weapon. He received a sentence of 10 to 25 years. For the murder trial, set to begin in October 2016, the defense again requested tattoo coverage. This time, Judge Michelle Levitt denied the motion, ruling that while the tattoos were inflammatory, they were self-inflicted and part of Morgan's chosen identity. She noted that jurors could be instructed to disregard them and focus on evidence. The decision sparked debate about bias in the courtroom. Could a jury truly ignore such overt symbols of hate when judging a man accused of killing an elderly woman? Before the murder trial could proceed, Morgan accepted a plea deal on April 12, 2018. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, robbery, burglary with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the death penalty and other enhancements. During the plea hearing, Morgan showed little emotion, though he later claimed remorse in a statement. Victim impact testimony from Maine's family highlighted the brutality. Her grandchildren spoke of losing a grandmother who had been a pillar of support and the senselessness of her death over a failed burglary. On January 9, 2020, Judge Levitt sentenced Morgan to 44.5 years to life in prison, an aggregate term ensuring he would serve at least 44.5 years before parole eligibility. At age 28 during sentencing, this effectively meant he might never be released. Prosecutors emphasized his criminal history and the tattoos as indicators of an unrepentant, dangerous individual. The defense pointed to his youth and troubled background but did not contest the severity. Morgan is currently incarcerated at High Desert State Prison in Nevada, classified as a high-risk inmate due to his affiliations and history. Appeals have been filed, focusing on the tattoo ruling and plea voluntariness, but courts have upheld the conviction and sentence. Jean Maine's murder exposed vulnerabilities in home security for elderly residents and highlighted biases in the justice system. Her family established a small memorial fund in her name for community safety programs. Morgan's case remains a landmark in Nevada legal history, the first where a judge ordered cosmetic concealment of tattoos for one trial but denied it for another, prompting discussions on juror prejudice, self-expression, and fair trial rights. It underscored how a defendant's appearance, especially one deliberately provocative, can complicate the pursuit of impartial justice. Number 7. David Adam. David Adam Pate was born around 1989 in Lancaster County, South Carolina, where he spent much of his early life in a rural, working-class environment. Details of his childhood are limited, but by his late teens, he had already begun accumulating minor criminal charges, mostly misdemeanors like disorderly conduct, theft, and simple assault. Neighbors and acquaintances described him as increasingly withdrawn and erratic, with a fascination for horror movies, particularly slasher films like the Halloween series. He idolized characters like Michael Myers, studying their methods and mannerisms not as entertainment, but as something to emulate. Pate's appearance reflected this dark fixation. He had a forked tongue from surgical bifurcation, and his face and neck were covered in tattoos including Satan across one cheek, 999 on his neck, an inverted 666, demonic symbols, and other ink meant to intimidate and provoke. These modifications were deliberate, turning his body into a canvas of horror that made him unforgettable and, to some, a walking warning. Pate's criminal behavior escalated in his early 20s. He faced charges for drug possession, weapons violations, and more serious assaults, serving short jail terms that did little to deter him. He associated with a loose circle of people in North Lancaster involved in petty crime and substance abuse, but he stood out for his intensity and lack of fear. Psychological profiles later compiled for court described him as impulsive, manipulative, and showing traits of antisocial personality disorder, with no diagnosed major mental illness that would impair his competency. The crime that defined him occurred on the night of October 21, 2013. Pate, then 24, invited Ricky W. James, 33, a local father of two who worked odd jobs and struggled with addiction, to hang out and drink in the woods behind Mala Circle, a quiet residential area in Lancaster. The two were acquaintances, not close friends, and there was no apparent motive beyond Pate's desire to act out a fantasy. Once isolated, Pate attacked James with a butcher knife, stabbing him 39 times in the chest, neck, and head. The wounds were frenzied and excessive, consistent with overkill. Pate then concealed the body under a pile of brush and leaves, leaving it to decompose. He returned home with blood-stained clothes but displayed no outward panic. Family members noticed his demeanor but didn't press. Pate carried on as if nothing had happened. James was reported missing by his family days later, sparking a search in the North Lancaster area. For nearly a month, the case stalled, rumors circulated, but no leads pointed definitively to Pate. On November 21, 2013, a group of children playing in the woods discovered the badly decomposed remains, alerting authorities. Lancaster County Sheriff's Office deputies responded, securing the scene and identifying the body through dental records and clothing as James. Autopsy results confirmed the cause of death as multiple stab wounds, with no defensive injuries suggesting James was caught off guard or incapacitated early in the attack. The investigation shifted into high gear. Witnesses placed Pate and James together on the night of the disappearance, heading toward the woods. Pate's blood-stained clothing, seized during a search warrant, tested positive for James' DNA. Knife fragments and blood spatter at the scene matched the weapon Pate was known to carry. Cell phone records corroborated the timeline, and associates reported Pate making cryptic comments about handling business in the days following. When brought in for questioning, Pate remained calm and detached. In interviews, he confessed matter-of-factly, describing the killing with clinical detail but no emotion. He admitted emulating Michael Myers, saying he wanted to see what it felt like to stab someone repeatedly. Detectives noted his lack of remorse. He even flashed his forked tongue and smirked during the session. Pate was arrested on November 21, 2013, charged with murder and concealing a death. The case moved to the 6th Judicial Circuit Court in Lancaster. Pate's appearance became a focal point. His tattoos and split tongue drew media attention, turning him into a viral figure online. Defense attorneys argued the visuals would prejudice jurors, but the judge denied motions to cover them, instructing the panel to focus on evidence. Pate showed no regret in court, often staring blankly or smirking during testimony. On April 9, 2015, he pleaded guilty to murder, avoiding a trial. During the plea hearing, he made chilling statements, including questioning why James would follow someone who looked like him into the woods. Victim impact statements from James' family highlighted the devastation. His 2 young children left without a father, his siblings mourning a kind man taken senselessly. Judge D. Garrison Hill sentenced Pate on April 9, 2015, to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, calling the crime senseless and Pate remorseless. Appeals filed in 2016 and 2017, citing ineffective counsel and mental health issues, were denied by the South Carolina Court of Appeals. Pate, now in his mid-30s, is serving his sentence at Lieber Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in South Carolina. He remains classified as a high-risk inmate due to his history and demeanor. The case left a lasting impact on Lancaster County, prompting community discussions on mental health, addiction, and warning signs of violence. Ricky James is remembered by family as a devoted father who deserved better. Annual vigils honor his memory. Pate's story, amplified by his appearance, became a cautionary tale about the intersection of fantasy, ideology, and real-world horror. A man who built a persona of evil and then lived up to it.